Hello everyone, John Maher here. This is your Grass10 update on the dairy edge. Now this week I'm going to be joined by Pat Tuohy from Teagasc. Many of you will know Pat from the Heavy Soils programme and is our drainage expert in the organisation. And I've worked with Pat for many years. He's still celebrating after last weekend, but we'll move on from that. And this is part of our infrastructure month, and today's subject is, and there's been a lot of questions about drainage, so we'll do that after the end of the Grass10 update. Well, in case of grass, anyway, the sun is shining, but grass is declining, I suppose. The growth rate is falling and will continue to do so. Last week it was about 45 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day of growth, but this will only go one way for most parts of the country. There is a low level of expectation of rain. I think that's overestimated. Parts of the country, like the northwest and maybe Kerry, will get a bit, but the rest I would suspect that it will be insignificant. For the record, average farm cover was 650 kilograms of dry matter per hectare, but this will decline also. So it's a case then of managing this decline and being proactive. The key here, to me anyway, for a start, is to walk the farm, see what grass there is, where it isn't, to see what is growing, and there are parts of the farm that are not growing. And then the decision and the planning, the decision is made, and the plans put in place to revolve around that. So for the record anyway, grass dry matters are quite high at the moment across the country. It doesn't make a difference where we're at about 25%. They will probably only increase the way things going. But what I do see is many farmers are underestimating, which often happens in drought, the level of grass that is available. It looks like 1,000 and it could be 1,500, or it looks like 700 and it's actually closer to 1,100 because the dry matters are so high. And animals are very content on this grass, to be honest, once it's there. But saying all that, anyway, the counties like Carlow, Wexford, Wicklow, Kildare, Waterford, Kilkenny, they are already in the deepest of soil moisture deficits and will only get worse. And many other counties are going to join them. And the growth rate in those counties is declining and declining fast. Like we're talking, sub 20 here now for many parts of the counties I've outlined. But anyway, more counties are going to join them, or parts of counties anyway, at least places like, East Cork, East Limerick, as they move into the Midlands, they're all only going to join those counties that are already in trouble. So, where to start then, I suppose, is to assess the grass supply in the farm. The farm growth rate is variable, across farms, but even within farm, right? So, you have to get a handle on this then, and as feeding will dominate, as people try to deal with the shortage of grass, the strip wire has to come out to get the allocations right, and not to waste the grass. We've learned many lessons from droughts over the years, but particularly, I suppose, 18, in which all the feed went in, but there was, grass left behind and wasted. This caused problems then in August when and further on when the rain did come and you have poor quality material. So, utilize what's there and utilize it well. Paddocks that are brown to the base and not actively grown, they should be targeted first for grazing because they're not going to do anything. The paddocks that are green to the base and actively growing, they need to be let grow and minded. And I suppose prioritize the animals that need green grass, if that makes sense to you. So they're obviously the dairy cows, weanlings, that type of stuff. Maybe the replacement heifers can go somewhere else, or go on a different diet. But I suppose you'll often hear about this 25-day rotation or grazing, 4% of the farm per day. There's, when the growth rate was 40 or 50 and you do the numbers, that worked. Now we're in a different story, but the target rotation length is still around 25 days. And I explain why as just a quick sum. Right. A lot of people are getting drawn into, I suppose, different strategies that are maybe complicated and forgetting the basics. So, when you're at a growth rate that's, sub 25 and, kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day, and, the numbers are going the wrong direction, but there's still a level of growth. So what I'm basically getting at here is there's a lot to be said for the simplicity of the 6 or 7 kilograms of silage a day, the 6 or 7 kilograms of grass a day, and the 6 kilos of meal a day. A lot to be said for it. It's very, very simple. And if you're stocked to 3 cows per hectare and you're growing 18, which some farms will still grow a bit, and again, there's going to be variation within the farm. That's why you need to walk and assess where the growth is. But if you're growing 18 on the farm, right? And a 25-day rotation, and you're stocked at 3 cows per hectare. Well, very, very quickly, it works out about 6 kilograms of grass or thereabouts a day. If you're stocked at higher now, I mean, it means it could get tighter than that. But at 3 cows per hectare, 25-day round, if you do the numbers, you're going to have grazing somewhere around the 700 or maybe 800 kilo marks of grass. Leave 100 behind. That's 600 or 700 left for the herd. And you know, for 100 cows, then that's doing those numbers, right? It's about 6 or 7 kilograms of grass a day. But just to explain, so if I have 100 cows and stocked at 3 cows per hectare, that means I have 33 hectares. I close enough on a hectare and a half a day. And if I'm doing 25 days by 20 day, that's 500. At a hectare and a half a day, it's 750 kilograms. Leave the 50 or the 100 behind, and you see what's left for 100 cows. That's how the numbers work. So, you know, that means then there's going to be 12 kilos or 13 kilos of other feed found. But between, silage and meal, that's possible. And it's a very simple way of operating in the drought without getting complicated into other feeds that bring complications with it now, right? So just to say that. Um, Fundamentally, though, what you're trying to do is, because the grass isn't growing, is reduce the demand on the farm. Like meal and silage, as I said, will be the simplest options for many. Right. Uh, I have to say one qualification. If you're tight on silage, then okay, you're going to have to maybe look elsewhere here. But that's where we want to do a fodder budget. We have to kind of ring fence some winter feed, no doubt about that. And if you're tight on that, then looking outside the farm will probably appeal to you, or zero grazing or something else. But anyway, some people are able to walk the roads a bit more and bring other ground into play, or bring size ground back into play. They may try to get the calves and the heifers off the normal platform and put them out to other outblocks or other land. So that will help. And then the one that everybody likes to hear from people like me, but like, you know, 10 cows out of 100. A lot of people are finished the breeding season or about to finish. 10 cows culled out of 100 between low yielders, cows with no future in the farm, I don't know, troublesome, cell count, go wherever you want to go here. 10 cows out of 100, right, taken out, will allocate 2 kilos of extra feed to the remaining 90 cows. People forget that type of stuff, right? So, okay, 10% seems a lot, but even 5% would help. So just, there's animals on the farm that shouldn't be there, especially if you're tight on feed, tight on slurry storage, TB test around the corner, wrong on nitrates. I'll say no more. Right, we'll move on. The nutrient side of things, like given the grow rates are going to be below for most people, sub 35, fertilizer spreading should just cease, especially if our allowances are tight. There may be the odd paddock on the farm that is still growing well, like reseeds, sheltered, I don't know, close to the river, call it what you want. They may grow a bit better, and that's fine. And you could look at some level of nutrient application there. I wouldn't be going 20 units or anything like that, but certainly maybe 10 or 15. The watery slurry is a massive source of valuable nutrients in droughts. We've learned that from many, many times past. And I'll cover that with our feature farmer as well. One thing I do see on many farms visiting around is that they tell me the animals have enough water, and I walk into the paddock and often the water truck is pretty low now. So water trucks can be put on roadways. Animals can be diverted to water trucks as they enter, and the enter for milking or leave for milking. A yard or a water truck in the collecting yard might go astray here. But anyway, the water systems will become under more pressure simply because the grass is going to get drier. Other feeds go in. Demand for water is big. To quote Paul Maher here on his figures, like a cow doing 30 litres in this weather will probably drink 120 litres or close to 25 to 30 gallons. So the demand is big, and it's particularly big after the evening milking. That's when most of the water is consumed, about 60 to 65%. So just keep that in mind, if that's all right, after the evening milking. Right, on to our feature farmer, East Clare. They're going to arrive into drought as well here, right? Cathal Nash, thanks to Cathal for doing this. Not easy to do this during this weather. Cahill's going to enter into the drought mode now as well. His average farm cover earlier this week was 547, growing 41, eating 44. So you see where that's going. Rotation length at the moment. Looking back is 25 days, but I'm going to suggest for people looking forward, it should be 25 days. or what I mean by that is 4 acres in 100 every day, or maybe 12 acres every 3 days, whatever you want to work it at. Stocking rate of 3.66, cover per livestock unit just less than 150, average pre-grazing yield 1100. So those numbers won't be surprised to many people. So Cathal is milking 262 cows, right? The diet currently is 12 kilos of grass, 5 kilo meal, and 3 kilos of silage, and that's only going to go one direction. He was grown over 70, I suppose, 2 weeks ago. We're now down into the 40s. The bale silage is going in before the evening milking. He's using strip wire and doing 12-hour allocations, all the stuff we know should happen, if that's okay. And growth is better in the paddocks that got the dairy washings. No surprises there. So, but that's what's happening on Cahill's farm. Looking forward then, right? Um, he's going to increase the meal probably to 6 to reduce the demand to 40. That's his first point of attack. If the dry weather continues, he will up the silage allowance and reduce demand to 30. And there's enough high quality silage available in the yard for about 4 weeks. He's going to move to a 30-day round and allocate about 9 kilograms of grass if the pre-grazing yield can be held at about 1,000 kilos. No fertilizers being spread, and dairy washings are going to be used on the paddocks that are going to be grazed, I suppose, and the ones that are growing the best. For the record, Cahill's milk yield is just under 22 litres at 3.81 protein and 4.36% fat. So I guess Cahill's entering drought. He's got proactive and has a plan to get more silage in, more meal in, trying to stretch the grass that's there, as the growth rate will decline probably from the 40s into the 30s. So that's Cahill's story. Cathal, thank you very much for doing that. Now, so I'm going to switch over here now to Pat Tuohy here for a minute, if that's okay, for a few minutes. Pat, thanks for joining us on the Grass10 podcast.
No problem, John. Good to talk.
So we often do Infrastructure Week at this time of the year, Pat, but we've done Infrastructure Month this time around because there's been a lot of queries, a lot of events we have on different things, roadways, water, things like fencing and tools of the trade like bat latches and things like that. But this week we're going to focus a little bit on drainage now. And it's something, Pat, you and I have done a lot in the past. And to put it mildly, the farms that we've worked with, the return in terms of grass production, lengthening the grazing season, and the grass survival on these paddocks that were drained is quite impressive, to say the least. I think that's fair to say.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's, I suppose the drainage issues have disappeared now with the extended dry spell, but there's certainly a great opportunity there now to get a nice bit of work done in this space. So, yeah, it's certainly topical, I suppose, as we speak.
Now we also need to be aware, Pat, like it costs money and the costs have gone up, but so has the cost of other the feeds. So we still think there's a massive return from improving land that can get a great response for drainage to put in. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, benefits are there plainly to see, the additional grazings and the additional growth and all types of feed are gone up in cost. So this is no different. I suppose you want to look at it from that angle. It's not cheap, but look, where it's done right, there's certainly a fair return on it.
Yeah, there are things that we don't think. We think about grass production and longer grazing season, but to take back to some of our farms in the program, Pat, like the ability to spread slurry on paddocks that they were never able to spread slurry on before. These things that we don't think about, but make a huge, addition to the farming life, as I call it, and being able to spread slurry on paddocks that they were never spread before is something that, and yeah, we don't factor in, but the farmers will tell you that very quickly, as you know. So we've a list of questions that come in through Infrastructure Month, I suppose, Pat. So we'll go through them here. I will start with those, I suppose, if that's all right.
That's fine by me. Yeah.
You have them there, so maybe you want to put some of them together. But anyway, we'll just start with the first one because I think it's on its own about mold ploughing, Pat. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a question there in terms of the benefits of mold ploughing, I suppose, from the off. All this is qualified by the usual story that I start to tell for those who've seen me around the place, that it's the same message. It's making the most appropriate system for the soil type and for the site in question. So, mold ploughing, very beneficial where it's suited. very high clay content soils with very few or no stones is where it's best suited. And where you have that scenario, typically drains on their own, if they're installed, shallow drains at a 20 or 30 meter spacing across the field area in one of those heavy soil types, they're very limited in what they can do. And the clear benefit of mole drainage or mole plowing at that, as the question is posed, is to try and amplify what water is collected by the drain. So you maximize the amount of water that's moving, and you get water to move where it otherwise wouldn't. So it's as simple as that. You're in those heavy, high clay content soils. There's very little natural water movement, so you're creating channels and avenues and pathways for the water to get going. So and the other side of that coin, the benefit talking about cost, is it's relatively cheap. So if the more expensive side of the infrastructure is there in terms of shallow collector drains, then pulling a mole plow, and now currently this very extended dry spell is the ideal scenario for that, where you're getting the most benefits and the least problems in terms of trying to install mole drains. So the opportunity is there, and now is the time, and the benefits then are as I say, maximizing what water will be collected in the drainage system that's already in the ground, and probably the more expensive part of the drainage system.
Pat, you and I going back to 18. I know, like, there's people worried about drought here, but the drought in 18 pack did a massive job for drainage, as you well know. We had very good ground conditions going into the autumn of 18, and sure, 19 spring was one of the best springs we ever had, mainly because the ground cracked and we got natural drainage, I
Yeah,
suppose.
you got
So,
shrinking and cracking and drying
w-
of the heavier soils, and
yeah,
that's what you're trying to encourage with the mole plow. So doing
exactly.
it now is helping with all that again.
So, what's that famous expression about clouds and silver lining? Even though there's only blue sky at the moment, it's not all bad. Anyway,
Absolutely.
we'll move on. Pat, link to the mole plow here. I'll keep going here because as I saw it here is the best way to drain blue clay. There's many a person in the country tormented by blue clay, and
Yeah,
when you bump into blue clay, Pat, you don't forget it in life. That's all I know anyway. But go on,
yeah.
yeah.
And it is, if it's a strong blue clay, and by that I mean a very heavy and stone free soil. You're back directly into what I just described in terms of mole drainage. For those soils that have some stones, I should mention, are where the open unlined mole channel won't sustain itself. The gravel mole plow is another option. It's much more expensive, but it is a very successful way of doing things. But yeah, the blue clay, look, and you, as you move around the country, you hear all sorts of different local names and phrases on the same thing. But again, it's trying. Water isn't moving through that,
It's
as
still
the
tough stuff to deal with
yeah,
anyway.
the person who asked that question is well aware. Water isn't moving, so it's
Mhm.
creating as much opportunities for it to move as possible. So it's the key thing there again, is something in the mold drain or gravel mold drain family, really.
Yeah, okay. That's why I linked the two of them together. I suppose, Pat, we'll move on. The springs, they always come up, those questions, Pat,
Uh-huh,
Anyway,
yeah.
and
So
go and chasing them. But anyway, we'll deal with it. Yeah.
yeah, so look, they're tricky, and it's easy sitting here. Maybe it's easy to oversimplify it, but the mistake that's often made is there is a drain put into a spring, or where a spring line is perceived to be, and depending on the vein of ground, it'll dance under that drain. It'll move away from you again, and it's very frustrating. So the key thing with springs is depth, making sure that the vein of ground that's carrying the water, and that takes a bit of digging and a bit of figuring out. And that's what I mean by, I don't want to oversimplify it, because it can be quite tricky to track these down. But the more investigating one does and figures out, have we fully tracked this down, and can we fully cut it off with a drain? And that's usually a deeper drain than is planned. Because as I said, if the drain goes in too shallow, and we've seen that countless of times, and people will be familiar with that, there could be a significant amount of money spent and effort gone to, and the year after or 6 months after, it might reappear again quite close by. So it's cutting that off, and trying to make sure you're getting as much giving it as much opportunity to find your drain as possible. So that's putting in a big enough and deep enough drain in most cases.
Pat, you probably saw the video I did for the farm in West Clare, Larry Dunphy's, the 1 minute video.
Yes.
In that case, the water was coming off the top of the ground, coming out as a we'll call it a spring or seepage, call it what you want, and we put the drain straight across the slope and at depth, and it's just outlined that 1 minute video. I just refer to people who are worried about springs. I suppose that's one of the basic strategies of trying to track this, Pat, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good go-to, I think. Yeah.
All right, okay. Then, right, Pat, some other questions here, about depth of pipe and stone fill and how wide and all that. I'm guessing there's some questions here, about bringing, stone to the surface and all those kind of things and how wide it needs to be. Sure, we don't bring stone to the surface, Pat, and we don't need to be too wide, I suppose. Isn't that the point?
Yeah, you're trying to again minimize the stone is a large proportion of the cost, and there once the drain is in and there's a reasonable amount of stone around your pipe, you're good to go. Really, there's no point over egging it. And by that, like you described, you don't need to go too wide. So the typical tile drainage bucket is what you're after. And stone, then there's deeper drains there where you're meeting groundwater. You'll marry in with where that's moving, and you put in 18 inches to 2 feet of stone. And then the shallower systems, again, you're trying to marry in with the mold drains or the gravel mold drains or something in that line. So again, you're putting in probably 2 to 3 feet of stone. In
That's
both
loads.
cases, yeah, loads, yeah. In both cases, as I said, you're not dreaming of you're quite content. I'd always be quite content to cover the top of the drains with subsoil or with soil fill. The deeper ones certainly aren't going to be filled up too high. You're where you're
And there's
meeting
no need to
groundwater.
either.
No, absolutely not. No, the
Pat,
topsoils are reasonably porous, and that will cover you.
absolutely. When we're there, Pat, the size of stone for the deep drains, we'll say now. Start there.
10 to 40 mil is for all drain types, for all field drains is the kind of recommendation. So that's kind of half an inch up to about an inch and a half, an inch and three quarters. People are always slightly surprised, or a lot of people are slightly surprised to hear that because bigger stone tends to be more available and tends to be
Yeah.
wider in use. But in terms of the longevity of the drain and keeping sediment and soil out, and maintaining a functional drain, the smaller sizes are better. Now there's a cost implication there, and we're well aware of that. But again, if you're asking me what the ideal is, it's what I've said, 10 to 40 mil, and clean, that it's coming in and loaded clean. And just to keep an eye as well, in terms of what's available at the local quarry, if you're in there on foot or if you're phoning in, there are certain piles of stuff here, there, and everywhere, and there can be a mix and match coming over the course of the day if stuff is coming out. So they just kept fairly consistent and kept clean are important points.
Yeah. Now, Pat, I haven't heard come across this one in a few years. Straw, Pat. It's an old
Yeah,
technique. Off we go.
yeah, yeah, and
Putting straw on top of the stone in the drains
when we go
before. Yeah.
digging, we're always digging into the history of what was done in places. So you'll
Yeah.
always hear these different tales of what may or may not have happened. So the question is, yeah, about putting straw on top of stone before
Before the
topsoil.
topsoil goes in top. Yeah. Yeah.
And it goes back to which is why you're probably linking me into that one. It goes back to the stone size, John. If your stone size
Yeah.
is okay and you're not, you're filtering out, you're not letting, there's going to be a certain amount of sediment getting through, regardless of what we do. And with a good flow and a drain that will clean it out, or there'll be a bit of self cleaning, and there's opportunities now to clean out drains with other various pieces of equipment. But again, if you're in the 10 to 40 mil stone size range, you're confident enough that there's a barrier there, or it's not totally going to stop the ingress of sediment, but it will slow it down significantly. So your straw, look, if it's there, fine, and if it's not going to do any harm, but I wouldn't be advising everyone to go out looking for it. There's no harm in it, but the main thing is that the stone is put in right. Is
Straw
your
is not
main.
cheap anymore either, by the way, Pat.
That's true as well, I suppose. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Right. We'll move on, I suppose. Two questions to go, Pat. Yeah, we have to cover this one, Pat. Draining all types of land now, and how does the farmer know? Yeah, we bumped into this now, Pat. This is like
Yeah, in
we
terms
know
of what's
the
allowed and
clay
what isn't.
soils versus the peat, and then you have what we call, the soils with a bit of peat in them. Yeah, so we better classify and guide here, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, so look, there is restrictions there in terms of the what's classified in the GAEC type soils in terms of the organic and P type soils. So people will be aware, or should be reasonably aware of what portion of the farm is in those categorizations. So there is a limitation there. In terms of mineral soils, clay and those type soils where there isn't restrictions, but there is There is a facility there in terms of the environmental impact assessment. There's applications can be made through the Department of Agriculture if there's any doubt in terms of there's limitations there in terms of threshold, in terms of total sizes that can be total areas that can be drained over a 5-year period, and impacts on SPAs or SACs or on peat soils or on wetlands. All those things are covered. So there is a means there of the question at the end of the question asks how does a farmer know? Well, that's the mechanism. If there's any doubt, it's to contact the department and fill out an environmental impact assessment application. If there's most of those are green lighted fairly quickly, and if there's issues then established, it's easy to establish what's the bounds of the problem, or what parts of the farm are um, allowed to be drained or not. But there's certainly, and it's a question that I've been asked more and more recently: are we allowed drain at all? And that certainly isn't the case. There's benefits there in terms of emissions and so on for reducing or lowering the water table on wet mineral soils and so on. So
And that's to
we
reduce
just need to.
the nitrous oxide gas, yeah, Pat, which is very
Correct, John.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, correct. So we just need to box clever and be aware of which categories certain parts of the farm may or may not fit into.
Yeah, but I know people are gone terrified of doing drainage, but that's not the case, Pat. Anyway, that's the point we're making, I suppose. It depends.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
And
right.
there has to be, and there's another question there. It might be
Oh,
might be
yeah,
worth looking into in terms of impacts on water quality.
yeah. That's the last one, Pat. It bugs
That's the
me a
one
bit,
that
this
we
question now. Yeah.
that's one that ties in with that as well. Obviously, you need to be very aware of what the local conditions are. For example, Inland Fisheries Ireland have people there on site, and they're available for consultation as well in terms of what the best approaches are. Between July and September is your ideal time now to be doing a lot of this work, because there's less of a risk in terms of sediment and that having impact downstream. But again, there's ways and means there. We touched off one already in terms of covering the stone with soil. Like, ultimately, with a drain, you're redirecting the water flow within the field, and what that water is interacting with in terms of as it leaves the field will decide in terms of impacts on water quality. So the deeper drains and those that are forcing the water to interact with more soil, and that the nutrient within it be retained, is obviously better on all fronts. Better that it be retained in the field, and not be causing potential for losses downstream. In terms of putting in, while the works are going on, there's a call there to put in sediment traps and so on, and there's guidance there in online and with booklets and with various different publications have been put together over the years in terms of just preventing preventing sediment getting downstream, cleaning open drains. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine as well. They tend to be forgotten about for 15 or 20 years, and then taken a very severe cleaning kind of goes on, and you'd be much better off with a little and often approach, picking and choosing and cleaning certain sections and leaving other sections vegetated. It's much more fruitful in terms of management overall, and much less risky in terms of sediment and nutrient loss. So again, it's just to be aware of those issues, and trying to manage that is the key thing. And the drains will reduce overland flow if they're put in right. So you're stopping, you're reducing losses of nutrient over the surface of the soil in those very wet conditions that we were getting for the first couple of months of the year. Those days when we're getting an inch or two of rain all of a sudden. If that water is flowing over the surface of the ground, then it's carrying a lot of sediment and a lot of nutrient with it potentially. So,
Especially
again,
phosphorus, Pat. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So, a well planned and well executed drainage system is going to reduce the risk of that as well. So, there's quite a bit of complexity there in terms of what the effect will be, and we just need to be very aware of that.
If I can finish with this line, Pat, I know you'll agree with me, but where we lengthen the grazing season by draining, and you know, basically the animal is feeding themselves and spreading their own slurry. I think there's a lot to be said for it. So that's the pros of having land drained and lengthening the grazing season, I suppose, Pat. Fair comment?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And look, we've only had a few minutes now. If there's anyone else looking for information, like, we have the manual there up online, freely available, and it's something that people can sit down with maybe, and dip in and out of. and that information is out there, and I suppose we're on hand to try and answer these questions in this format and in other formats. So, we'll try and do our best to help people out where the queries are coming in.
Yeah, so look, we've handled the queries that come in. We're still going in infrastructure month. If people still have more queries, send them in, and we'll reply to those. Pat, thanks for today. And enjoy your celebrations anyway after Limerick's victory. I know you will, but I better mention that and say thanks, Pat. If you'd like to hear more from the Grass10 team, subscribe to the weekly Grass10 newsletter, which is available on the Grass10 page on the Teagasc public website, and the link to this newsletter is also the description of this podcast. We'd like to thank all those who support the Grass10 campaign, EIB, Grass10 Agro, Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, FBD and the Farmers Journal. This has been your Grass10 update. And we'll talk to you all next week when I believe anyway the challenges of grass supply and growth will still be there. Until then, best of luck.